This video isn't about Drake. This video isn't about Kendrick Lamar. And hell, this video isn't even about J. Cole. I've been thinking more and more recently that we will truly never see another big three within hip-hop. Or at least not to the extent that the original big three took over the conversation of greatest rappers of the 2010s. And while I do think the idea of the 2010s big three is inherently pretty limiting, since it excludes people like Kanye and Future from the list, both of which could easily replace J. Cole in my opinion, I still thought it'd be fun to do a little thought experiment determining what current three rappers could fit into a hypothetical big three of the 2020s. Now right off the bat, obviously there's no objective answer as to which rappers would perfectly fit into this 2020s big three, since like I said, we really never will see another trio with as much collective cultural influence as the original 2010s big three had. But with my picks, I wanted to try and assign a rapper for each 2010s big three member based on how well they fit into the mold of their original counterpart. And with this criteria, trust me, you're gonna want to stick around for my last pick. It's pretty insane. But yeah, with that all out of the way, let's get into my picks.
I got this shit you would light with a lighter. Fuck a lighter, I could light on the stove. Dark at night, I drop a log.
So starting with by far the easiest lock on this list, and it's gotta be JID. Since 2018, he's been on an absolutely insane run of quality albums, singles, and features. Like, I listened to the Forever Story again a few days ago, and my god, I forgot how incredible that record is. And with how early he really still is in his career, along with his steady increase in mainstream popularity since 2022, it really feels like we're gonna witness JID's ascension to the throne in just a few short years. But while he was an easy choice to put on a list of big three of the 2020s, whose spot he would take between Kendrick Lamar or J. Cole was a much harder question for me. Obviously, J. Cole was the guy to sign him to Dreamville in the first place, making him kind of a Cole protege by extension. But ultimately, I did end up putting him in Kendrick's spot since I do think that the two share more similarities, at least artistically speaking. Firstly, JID is definitely the best lyricist of the three, as Kendrick is to the 2010s big three. I also think that JID's style of lyricism is a lot more like Kendrick's as opposed to Cole's. See, I always personally differentiated Kendrick and Cole's writing styles like this. Kendrick prioritizes more covert lyricism, whereas Cole prioritizes more overt lyricism. While Kendrick tends to add a lot of layers and metaphors to his words, J. Cole more just says it like it is, if that makes sense. And I'm not saying that one style of writing is objectively better than the other or anything, even if I do prefer Kendrick's style of writing, but I do feel like JID leans way more into the covert end of the spectrum. If you still disagree with my reasoning, that's absolutely fine, but I think in the context for my pick with J. Cole, JID being in Kendrick's position makes a lot more sense. And speaking of J. Cole's spot,
Keep on walking, ain't no stopping in this dirty, filthy, rotten, nasty.
Now finding a rapper to fill in for J. Cole's spot in the big three was a lot tougher since I already did put JID for Kendrick after all. But after some consideration, I do feel like Denzel Curry is a pretty solid pick all things considered. Denzel is of course another artist with a really strong discography and is definitely worthy of big three conversation if we're going by quality of work alone. Also the fact that he's still under 30 means that he has by far the most time of the three rappers on my list to attain the cultural influence that the 2010s big three members had. But still, I'd be lying if I said that there weren't any holes in my argument against picking Denzel, especially as a fill-in for J. Cole. For one, he's definitely the least popular artist of my three picks, and while Cole is also the least popular member of the 2010s big three, I think that with Denzel specifically, it could be argued that he's just too niche of an artist right now to get to a level of commercial success similar to anybody in the 2010s big three. But when looking at most other aspects of the two, I feel like Denzel and J. Cole might be more similar than the average person thinks. Firstly, Denzel is definitely an artist with a more covert writing style like Cole, for better or for worse sometimes. And it might just be me, but the two kind of seem like they have a similar character, or at least what we can get out of their character from the various interviews and public statements they've made. See, I've always pictured J. Cole as this super chill, nice guy that really just raps for the love of the craft. And from what I've seen of Denzel Curry, it seems like he shares the same passion to create without necessarily appealing strictly to what the public wants. They both have a more make music for the sake of making music vibe to me, if that makes sense. And overall, this is definitely the pick in here that fits the least of the three, but to be fair, I did give myself a pretty strict rule set with this little thought experiment of mine, so I don't think there was ever going to be a perfect match to any one of these artists on here. And I do genuinely think that Denzel Curry deserves a spot in the 2020s big three, regardless of whose spot he fills in specifically. With Denzel's placement though, we're left with the final spot in the 2010s big three to replace. But before we go over who I think would fill in Drake's spot best for a 2020s big three, I want to first go over some honorable mentions that I've seen other people include in their personal 2020s big three list that just didn't end up making my cut. So starting with probably the biggest snub out of all of my picks, that being Travis Scott. Obviously, Travis has been massively successful these last few years, has a very strong discography despite only having 4 studio albums, and is definitely on pace to stay a hip-hop superstar at least for the rest of the decade. But my main issue with him is that I feel like he doesn't really fit well into any of the established molds of the 2010s big three. To me, Travis has always felt like he fills more of a Kanye role within his music, image, and influence. And despite how much I think Kanye deserves 2010's big three status when looking at critical and commercial success as well as influence in the genre, at the end of the day, he isn't a core member of the 2010's big three like Drake, Kendrick, or J. Cole, and so choosing a rapper so influenced by him doesn't really make sense with the mindset I went into this with. Same goes for another really popular answer I saw for 2020's Big 3, Playboi Carti. Another artist that really reminds me more of Kanye than any other artist in the 2010s Big 3. Although I will say, ignoring the restrictions I imposed on myself for these picks, I think Carti does deserve to be in 2020's Big 3 conversation for pure influence alone. I'll probably be making a video soon on this exact topic, but I genuinely can't fathom how much he's managed to skyrocket in popularity and influence. Like, this man is the pioneer of one of the most popular subgenres of rap that we've seen in a minute. Not to mention, Whole Lotta Red is up there with one of the most influential albums of the 2020s. But again, with my particular and, need I remind you, subjective set of rules in mind, he just doesn't really fit. Another pick I saw a lot was actually JPEG Mafia, and while I absolutely agree when it comes to pure quality, he has easily one of the best and most consistent discographies in modern hip-hop. Unfortunately, I do think a really important factor when it comes to being in Big 3 conversation is commercial and cultural impact, and Peggy's music by nature isn't really made for a mainstream audience like the music of other Big 3 contenders. And last honorable mention here, but I went with Juice WRLD, since I think he would have been a perfect fill-in for Drake's spot with his melodic rap style had he not passed away so early into his career. Like, seriously, I genuinely think that guy could have been on top of the world with his music if he had just like a few more years in the rap game. It really is a tragedy how young he went out. But with all of my honorable mentions out of the way now, let's finally talk about my last pick for this 2020's Big 3.
Darling, 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 there's no need to worry.
Alright, just hear me out here. I know on the surface it seems like Tyler the Creator and Drake could not be more different artists, but if you'll hear me out, I do have a few arguments as to why this pick does kind of fit in my opinion. First though, I want to counter what's probably the biggest reason as to why people wouldn't put Tyler in a 2020's Big 3, and that's simply because he's already in 2010's Big 3 conversation. I mean, the guy has been part of mainstream rap way before Jade or Denzel Curry after all. But like I mentioned a while back in my Music Hot Takes video, Tyler's a super weird artist when it comes to discussing his discography, since you really can split it into two distinct periods, the pre-Flower Boy era and the Flower Boy and Beyond era. In a lot of ways, Flower Boy does function as a debut album to this new version of Tyler after all, so I think with that lens it makes it a lot easier to understand where I'm coming from here. But still, for me to slot him into the Drake position of this Big 3 seems crazy, right? I mean, they make such different music. And I'll give you that, their sounds are completely separate from each other, but I have a little prediction for Tyler's next album that I think makes my case a little bit more. So obviously, Tyler hasn't released a full album since 2021's Call Me If You Get Lost, and with it being a return to rap for Tyler, I'd imagine he's gonna want to switch up the genre for his next release, as he likes to do. So what if, as we speak, Tyler the Creator is cooking up a full-on pop record for 2025? I mean, we've already seen him branch out into a poppier sound with Igor, and even some tracks on the estate sale like Wharf Talk. And this 2025 pop album theory also counters another argument against Tyler's spot, that being that he isn't anywhere near as popular as Drake. And to be honest, this next point is what properly convinced me that this pick absolutely can work. I was looking at the streams for Igor the other day just for fun, and I was absolutely floored. I mean, I know it's a classic and all that, but like, 100 million streams on every single track on the album is ridiculously impressive for Tyler, and tons of others with well over 300, 400 mil. Hell, Best Interest was a scrapped song for the record, and it has over 600 million streams. That is nuts. And that's not even mentioning his other massive songs, including See You Again with nearly 2 billion streams. The man can make hits is what I'm trying to say. So with these streaming numbers in mind, I genuinely think that if Tyler were to release a poppier album in 2025, albeit it's still up to his usual level of quality, it would do insanely well commercially. Now Drake numbers, probably not, but my point is Tyler absolutely does have the commercial success to be worthy of a spot. And I know, even with all of this evidence in mind, there's probably still a lot of you that disagree with my opinion here. But to be fair, Drake was easily the hardest of the 2010's Big 3 to find a fitting match for this list, mainly because he's kind of a chameleon when it comes to his music. And I mean that in the sense that he pulls from so many different places within his music that it's kind of hard to quantify his style as a singular thing. And thus it feels nearly impossible to find newer artists primarily inspired by him, besides Jack Harlow, I guess. So with all that being said, I truly think that as weird as it sounds, Tyler the Creator is the best artist to fill in Drake's spot for the 2020's Big 3. So, those are my 3 picks for a potential 2020's Big 3. If you enjoyed, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel with the bell rung to see new uploads from me every single Friday, unless they say otherwise in my community posts. Also, leave a comment letting me know what your own personal 2020's Big 3 would look like and why you put the artist that you did. I'd love to see the reasoning for other people's picks. And finally, as always, if you'd like to support the channel further, you can now become a member and receive early access to my videos, as well as a special shout out from me in them, as you'll see on the screen right now. So join up if you're interested, it really does help me out a lot. But yeah, that's about it. Thanks for watching.